Hello and welcome back to Mandibil. This will be part 2 of the presentation of my complete philosophy from A to Z, from ontology to ethics, right? Or from ontology to a moral principle, maybe you could say. And whatever I may add during the course of this. Okay, so far so good. I've done ontology, or at least I've presented my approach to ontology. I haven't given you all minute details. If you need further clarification, let me know, because I might find it intuitive, but sitting from the outside like you are, so to say, it might not be as clear because I've already have it as a part of my mentality. For you, it might be quite new, at least in some respects. And in some respects, my approach to philosophy is quite different than most, if not basically everyone else. Excuse me. So I believe I've done sufficient on ontology, and I need to go into the next step, which is dealing with the idea of an external world. Now, why would I talk about that? It's again, why am I doing this? Does it necessarily follow that I have to do this? Maybe not. Maybe not. But it's like this, what I'm presenting is a result of many years of thinking. And those many years of thinking has sort of materialized, you could say, into this scope of my philosophy. And there might be a lot of little thoughts and intuitions and whatever that has sort of condensed into this. So my thinking is, to some extent, maybe kind of lost why I needed to do it. I'm not saying that I don't know what I'm doing, but there might be little, things here and there, and you get a notion of thinking of when you're dealing with your, it's like a lot of philosophy is based on your vantage point. If you're standing there and look in that direction, it looks like you have to go there, right? If you don't see the rest. Now I try to see it 360, so to say, and see where could I possibly go, and where might I need to not necessarily go, but at least deal with it. So I constantly look out that there's not holes in my philosophy, where usually it seems that people are dogmatic, which is the same as saying, I only have to look in this direction. I don't have to look at, it's done, right? At least that's one way to do it. So when I have my ontology, I'm saying a 360 approach to what could possibly be the next step in my thinking. Is there something I need to deal with even? You can say that dealing with an external world and potential metaphysics is also a part of ontology, but for particular reasons I really want them to be kept apart. Because it seems like these definitions and lines between what we're doing, they're floating together. And that's also usually a bad sign from the ones who are presenting their philosophy. When lines between definition and use of terms, they sort of overlap without further clarification, you should be up in arms. You should be, scrutinize what they're saying and figure out what they ask for definitions and reduction base and all that, right? If they don't have that, well then don't be too, inspired maybe by their philosophy. And I'm not trying to create a cult here, because what I'm saying always is, it's not because you should do what I say or what my philosophy follow that necessarily. You should do your own philosophy, right? Usually cult is, my philosophy is mine and therefore it must be perfect. So if there's a problem in somebody else's philosophy, you should come over to my philosophy. So it starts to become sort of cultish, right? And this is a problem all through the ages, right? There might be a connection between people doing philosophy and having a ridiculous level of belief in their own righteousness. I'm so great and good and virtuous that whatever I come up with is perfect philosophy, right? And an example of that might be somebody like Stefan Molyneux and Bernardo Kastrup, right? You know, it has some tendencies, right? They both have this cultish flavor to them. So, I am absolutely against any kind of cultism, right? If it's not obvious, let me just state it outright. Okay, so if I've settled something that this is my ontology, could there be more to it than what I'm describing? Could I be describing some, you could say, I'm hesitating in the choice of words here, because it seems like when we're dealing with ontology and metaphysics and external world, language as it is known, as we know it, is not sufficient to describe it precisely or to avoid potential misunderstandings and mischaracterizations and so on, right? But could it be a limited scope I'm dealing with when we're dealing with ontology? Could there be more to it that is just not a part of what I'm describing using ontology? Is there something external to what I'm describing? I can't rule it out, right? But I have to deal with it only because I came up with the thought that there might be. And it's because I'm thinking about it, but not experiencing it, because what I just did was describing what I'm experiencing, so to say. All right? So if I imagine there might be something beyond my experiences or outside my experiences, or whatever term you want to put on it, it must from the beginning be an imagination. And imagination is not that which it imagines. If I imagine a cow, my imagination of that cow is not a cow, right? Even if you say that when you get further down the road with a potential external world and representations of an external world, that representation, even if I have a direct experience of cow, cannot be the real cow then. Right? So, but that's further down the road. So, if I don't imagine there's some external world, I am possibly a default solipsist, you would say, right? That it doesn't even occur to you. I mean, you're a true solipsist. It wouldn't even occur to you that there could be that you could imagine an external world, right? Okay, so as soon as you start imagining an external world, it sort of falls out of it. You have to deal with it now. It's a little red pilling, right? You have been red pilled into an external world imagination. Now that I've imagined it, I have to deal with it. What if I didn't imagine there was an external world? I probably wouldn't be sitting here, right? Talking to you. So now I have to deal with it. Can I rule out there is an external world? No, because it's external. All the tools I have are tools that goes with what I'm describing in my ontology. As soon as I ask, is there something beyond my ontology? All my prior tools disappear because they are not a part of that external world. And this is where a lot, if not basically all philosophers, they start to come apart, what they're doing. Because they say, okay, now I'm going to use the tools I'm using within my ontology to describe that external world. That's a humongous fallacy, right? You can't do that. You can't even settle if there is an external world or not, in my opinion, because it's imaginary. And if you recall my ontology, you'll see it later in the slide here, but I'm not going back and forth in slides, because PowerPoint is going to screw it up then, right? I have to take it slavishly, slide by slide, and I cannot necessarily always predict the slide order and what I need at this particular slide and so on. But I have a category C, which is sort of second level to the other two categories, which are primary, you could say, right? Let's just put it that way. So if I'm dealing with an imagination, the content of that imagination doesn't become that content. So what I mean is, if I imagine an external world, doesn't mean that an external world all of a sudden appears. And this is also one of those fallacies that, and I think it's because it's old dogma, because most people, if not all individuals, in my opinion, in my estimation, the default setting is naive realism, that what you experience is the actual world, right? So when you realize that cannot be the case, you retract into, okay, but at least I have my, my phenomena, right? But then you sort of, because you were used to dealing with an external world, you just sort of retract into subjectivity, but you keep that external world as if it's already settled that it's there. You should realize then that if all you ever actually had was those phenomena, which are particular to you, right? So there is no settled external world. That should be a kind of obvious conclusion. You might not be aware that you should be careful keeping your dogmas, right? And I keep saying, get rid of your dogmas, get rid of your dogmas, get rid of your dogmas. Basically, Cartesian doubt, right? To the furthest extent, possibly. So, what do you have to work with? Well, before I get into that, I want to add a few comments to corrections and additions to my previous part. I think I said that I don't. I said that I leave category C behind. And you will, the category C that you will see in the green ontology box, right? You will see it again on the next slide, actually. But I have the category C with abstractions, and I say, okay, when I leave ontology, I leave abstractions, category C behind. Not quite, because I'm going to use them now. But the point is, as far as possible for me, I'm going to use category A and B as the foundations for the rest of my philosophy, unless I cannot do it, but I need to get further. Then I would have to use some category C aspects in order to settle the next step in my philosophy. And that's where that risk assessment matrix comes in, because that's basically using category C to make the assessment. So as far as possible, I'm using category A and B in my philosophy. Only when I can't do it, I say, now I'm at a point, I can't do it with category A and B. I need to use my abstractions now. And I say it loud and clear so you understand it, right? I'm not screwing around and, gaslighting and manipulating and sophistry and so on. I try to be as strict and clear about it as I possibly can, right? So it's an exceptional occurrence that I use abstractions, right? It's sort of a backup, it's a plan B kind of thing, right? So, okay, I mentioned also in my last presentation, I think, that I would talk about shapes. And I forgot to do that, so I'll do it here, right? My idea is that there's an intermediate step. There's an aspect of cognition that I don't have sort of direct access to, but I can tap into it. And those are the concepts. The concepts is the mental recollection of prior cognitions, of a prior type of cognition, like elephant, right? So if I was able to cognize elephant, the mind keeps a form, to stay with Plato's idea of forms, right? That form is, for instance, elephant. And I think that, and it could be beaver and so on and so on and so on, right? All these types of cognitions, a train and car and bicycle and laptop, right? How these concepts are put together. I think there is a basic language of constructing concepts which is based on basic shapes like circles, lines, squares, triangles, so on, right? So there's a basic language that puts concepts together. And that might be the reason why that we can compare two concepts like a giraffe and a goat, right? They're quite different in colors and size and shape, but they still have a neck, right? They still have a head. They have a body, they have legs. You know, leg is a sort of a sub-concept, but they can work together because they're fundamentally of the same kind of geometric language of which concepts are constructed. This is just sort of a theory, you could say. I don't like to call it theory. It's a guesswork. It's sort of, it could be, yeah, you can never get to it, I suppose, but that might also be why we human beings are fairly good at dealing with geometry, right? Triangles and circles and squares and cubes and whatever, because it's built into cognition. It's a potentially, if I'm right, an important part of cognition, because it's a language of how concepts are constructed, or Platonic forms, right? Okay, and I don't mean, I'm not Platonic in the sense of how Plato argued for how they occur, these forms, but it's just a basic idea of a form, right? So form is a low key description of it, so that's fine, right? Okay, so let me jump into the next one here. Okay, so what we've done so far, or what I've done so far, is I've done my ontology. I've ended up with a structure that says A, B, and C, and they have composed the way they're sort of shorthand description of it here that is pretty straightforward and not hard to understand, I should suspect. There might potentially be problems in it, but I don't think so. Not least because they are big but very well defined categories, right? The only change I've done is putting the idea of space into abstractions, right? Okay, and it's possibly, I did that because possibly the idea of space is why I came up with the notion of, hey, there might be some externality. It's embedded in the thinking, the notion of space, that could it be beyond? So I'm kind of appealing to a spatial notion, while at the same time I'm saying it's not a spatial notion. But in order to present it, I need to use space here in my presentation. So just be careful that you don't over-interpret what I'm saying in a spatial manner. But in order to delineate things, I have to create space between them. So it's sort of built into the cake, right? Okay, so that's why I write external world, question mark, then imagine spatiality as not as a part of the external world, but because of my notion of space. That might be the reason why I came up with the idea that might be an external world. If I didn't have the notion of space, it might not occur. But I can't tell you. I can't tell you what doesn't happen when it doesn't happen. If it doesn't happen, I don't know the reason why it doesn't happen. It's only when it happened I could say, oh, that the reason might have been, right? I can't give the reason for things not happening because I'm not aware that they could happen. I don't want to be, cryptic here, right? But I hope you understand. Okay, so now that I've took the red pill and the red abstraction pill, right? and came up with the idea that I can't reject it. I can't just say, fuck that, right? I actually have to take it seriously. So, okay, what do I actually mean then when I'm talking about an external world? Well, it must be some kind of outside phenomena. It is as I said before, this is linguistically, this is very difficult to describe without creating misconceptions or misunderstandings. And so I want to keep it as basic as I possibly can. And if you have better ways to describe this, let me know. I really want to describe this without creating misunderstandings, right? But outside phenomena. So I say, because I think that the idea of the external world arises because I have a sense of space, I'm then using that space as a placeholder, for a lack of good term, to say outside phenomena, right? It's not necessarily outside in the spatial sense, but it's just not where the qualia is, right? Or the phenomena is. Can I rule it out? No, right? External world can itself only be an imagination also that appeals to the notion, right? So what I'm saying is, my idea of an external world is in itself an abstraction, just like all else of my philosophy is just an abstraction that describes something, right? The same goes for the idea of an external world. It's the abstraction in itself is not an external world. And the abstraction cannot validate that kind of existence. Just because I came up with the idea there might be an elephant in my garden doesn't make it so, right? And if I can't go outside into my garden, I can never verify whether or not there is an elephant, or even if there is a garden for that matter, right? If I've never seen it. So just me imagining a garden and an elephant doesn't make it so. And in this similar kind of fashion, though it's more serious when we deal with external worlds, right? I can never settle if there is an external world, right? I can imagine it all I want, but that doesn't make it so. As I say, it'll only be an imagination that appeals to the notion. I have this imagination, but it doesn't make it so. Okay. So whether there's something actually to the imagination, as there's something, as I said, there's actually something to it, I can never get to, because it's still just an abstraction. It's never the thing that it appeals to, right? So I cannot settle it either by qualia and cognitions, because they're particular to my phenomena. They are phenomena. They're particular to the confines of phenomena. If we're talking about an external world, I am excluding everything that I've done so far. So I don't have any tools either, right? I can't use the tools of qualias and cognitions to describe or to figure out whether that is an external world. And even if I could somehow establish it, like say, there it is, right? I couldn't describe it because I don't have the tools to do it. So this is where I'm saying, okay, the idea of a metaphysics is so far-fetched and mysterious that I'm not trusting any of it. All right? So, as I pointed out, I finished this, the gray box to the right here, right? So I will use my dilemma matrix, right? I'm using my abstractions to settle whether or not I'm going with it or not. And I've shown that in a prior show before this series, and I'll get back to it in the next slide, right? And as I pointed out earlier, which by the way actually is using class C as an unavoidable exception, because I can use category A and B to settle this, I only have the choice to use some kind of class C, category C abstraction to do it. And that abstraction is using abstractions within a matrix, a risk assessment matrix. That's my approach. If you have a better approach, let me know. Okay, so I think that was something else I wanted to say. I forgot that. Yeah, maybe I'll get back to it, right? What was it? Never mind. So when we get to the next slide, which is the matrix you have seen before, right? It's like, well, if I can't reason my way to it, I have to map out all the possibilities I can identify, right? And in this case, there are 4. There is an external world or there isn't an external world. There's no middle ground there, right? And I'm going, either I say, yes, I agree, or no, I disagree. Oh, I'm not, I don't have split personality, right? I settle on it, yes, on the axiom, or it's a yes axiom or no axiom, right? And these combinations of 4 scenarios, I look at each one of them, and the 2 yes axiom risks combined compared to the 2 no axioms combined, I assess which one is least risky. And in my opinion, as I pointed out before, it's my yes axiom, right? And I might go into each of them, right? Okay, let's say that there is actually an external world, right? If I say there is an external world and there actually is an external world, then fine, I am aligned with how things are. So by trying to deal with it as best as I can in my philosophy, I get as close to how things are actually. I'm actively doing it, and it's because it's there, what I'm doing is actually the best alignment with what there is. So if I deal with it and it's there, it's actually the best, it's the most precise, I would say, supplied that I do some reasonably good, very good philosophy, right? To deal with it. In the case of say no, and there is an external world, it's like, it's very problematic because I pretend that it isn't there, and it's potentially inflicted itself on me. I can't rule that out. If there's something beyond my qualia, it might be something that is not beneficial. And if I don't treat my, I have a philosophy for dealing with it, it might be hugely detrimental to me, right? On the other side, if there is no external world, and I say I'm working from the idea that there is, then I'm just sort of wasting my time, right? I'm spending time and money and energy and whatever, trying to deal with something that is no problem. I only have to deal with my qualia, right? My phenomena. There is nothing else. So I'm spending time on, so it might not be, it might be a waste of time and space, time and resources, so to say, but it's not going to do anything because it's not there, right? In the case that I'm, say, no, there is no external world, and there actually is no external world, then fine. And at least I'm attempting to align myself, again, with how things are. If I'm doing the same, I'm treating that aspect in the same way as it actually is, I'm some kind of in alignment with it. But the problem with there's no external world and it's not there, it starts to be difficult for further philosophy. And I'm very, very strongly encouraged to deal with my phenomena. And to deal with the phenomena, I need a reason why I need to deal with them. And the only thing I can see is that there must be I have to deal with them as if there is an external world. The only way I can put the pieces together in a sensible manner, in a reasonable manner, and I'll get back to that, right? And the other thing is, from an emotional, psychological point of view, I think it's difficult to say there is no external world, because it will always be nagging at you, right? But I might be wrong. It's like sitting in the tall grass and hearing the roar of something that might be a tiger. Okay, now I have to do the matrix, right? Do I want to say it's a tiger, or don't I want to say it's a tiger? And if I come up with the idea, well, there's no tiger, it just feels like, I'm not sure about that, right? I might be able to reason philosophically well and say, judging from the, cost benefits, I don't think that's a tiger. And then you stick your head up the grass and then, right? So it's the unknowable aspect of it that tends to bow towards, I have to deal with it under any circumstance. I'm not saying you have to do that, but if you say there's no external world, you are still not settled whether or not it's there, right? You can't settle it. You can only start to treat it as if or as if not. You are still aware of this matrix that you lift out some possibilities, right? So at the end of the day, I think it's very, very difficult to avoid anything but the yes axiom. But give it your thought, right? I mean, if I'm aware of a possible risk, it's like I have to deal with it, even if it's not there, right? So at most I could waste my energy. And if there is an external world, then I'm actually dealing with it the best way I possibly can, right? Because I'm taking it seriously. So at the end of the day, this matrix very much in favor. It's not a 50-50, it's a 95 to 5%, right? I mean, I don't want to quantify anything, but it's sort of to illustrate where I'm sort of, the more I look at it, the more it's like I have to deal with an external world. Now, as I pointed out several times, right? And I'll jump to the last slide here. I decide to work from the idea that there is an external world. But, and that's why I've taken my light green box of ontology and put a gray circle around it. It's an illustration. It's not a description. It's just a conceptual description, okay? I go with the axiom there is an external world, but I still have not proved that it's there. I can't prove that it's there. Or prove I can't argue that it's there. Just because I decided I'm going to treat my philosophy as if there is an external world, didn't create that world. I can never settle if it's there. And if I can never settle it's there, it goes without saying almost. You can't do any metaphysics, because a metaphysics, in my opinion, is starting to tell you, how does it work? What is it made of? And all these things that people like Bernard Kastrup spent all his waking hours apparently trying to describe. And coming up with one more harebrained, mystic woo-woo kind of philosophy after the other, right? So, there is no metaphysics. Because I can't do it. I'm not allowed to do it. Create my own thinking. I can't just say, well, now I'm going to tell you how it works because I decided so, right? No, you can't do that. I can do that. If there's some way to do it, let me know. I don't think you can do it, but I'm skeptical, so I'm keeping a door open for somebody who can present an argument for why there must be an external world. Let me have it. I have never seen it yet, and I don't expect it to arrive any day soon, right? So, how do I approach that? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it in my next step, which is epistemology. There I'm going to tell you how all these things fit together perfectly, right? Epistemology is that which gels these things together, the ontology, the idea of the external world, and the idea of knowledge. So, hang on to your trousers, right? Going to knock your socks off at least. So no metaphysics. And another way to say this, which I pointed out in my criticism of Bernardo Kastrup, not least, is it was because I had the ontology or the phenomena that I all of a sudden had the idea, as I just told you, that there might be something beyond my ontology or my phenomena, right? So it was because of my phenomena and how my phenomena are structured qua my ontology that I thought that also maybe because of the structure, there's a reduction base. You're reducing yourself to a reduction base and then stop. Is there something further I just can't get to? It's also this feeling that metaphysics is sort of deeper than ontology. You're going beneath ontology in order to describe something you don't have access to, in order to explain why ontology appears the way it does. And this is also something that Bernardo Kastrup does. It impinges itself on your screen, so to say, and that's why there are these dials, as he says in his analogy, right? But the point is, you were using that screen to get to the idea that there might be something beyond the screen that then inflicts itself on the screen and creates that screen you just used. That's a circular argument. If you start to use that imaginary external world to change your understanding of your screen, so to say, your phenomena, you're creating a circle. It's a circular argument. It's an invalid step. It doesn't work. It must not be allowed to work, in my opinion. That's why metaphysics is futile. It's a wishful thinking. It's a fantasy. It's a possibly some psychological thing that I won't accept. There's something I can't explain. I have to stay back and not try and explain it. Maybe my fantastic brain can do it because I'm so smart and I have 2 PhDs, you know? So I should be able to do it. And somebody else has done it. Kant has done it. Hegel has done it. Berkeley has done it. Hume might have done it, right? And so on. So, it's very important you understand how and if I'm not arguing it well enough for you to understand, at least understand where I'm coming from, you may not necessarily be accepting what I'm saying. But why I argue that metaphysics is a Frankenmonster of a kind of philosophy. And I have to avoid it. And I have no problem avoiding it because I have a very strong notion that it's just pure fabulation, right? And it's also these things that this is where people put their God, right? So people can go check it because they understand intuitively that it's beyond your ontology, right? So you can't have any qualia, but you can't refute it either. So they can have their God. They can always say, well, you can't deny it, right? And so God is out there where you can't check it, right? So mommy is right, you know? Okay, so what do you think about this? Let me have your comments. This is one of the another important step, right? This is really, I mean, I'm going down in the meat and marrow of this, right? In the under the hood and deep down in the motor of things. And I basically point out that you have to be rigid in your philosophy, because if you're not, you're just going to venture in where you can't go, or you're going to leave something behind that you should have dealt with, and so on. You can't just start talking and saying, the word, another fancy word, paper, I've done it, right? Give me some money, right? Doesn't work. It's ridiculous. Let me have your comment. Please share, like, and subscribe. Let me have your comments. Well, are you afraid that I might hunt you down because you don't agree or something? Let me have your criticism, because I mean, this is if you follow me on my channel, why don't you criticize what I'm doing? Are you not a philosopher? Are you not interested in this shit, right? So please show yourself. And otherwise, have a nice day. See you in the next one.